use your head when it comes to money. How many of you believe that? How many of you practice that? And do you know anyone who does not? Honestly? So I've discovered that we only use a portion of our full faculties when it comes to money, and we're not aware of it. I've spent my entire career observing people around money, both in their personal finance as well as in the macro flows of capital. And as a purpose and money coach today, I help people change behaviors and make important decisions about their livelihoods and their financial futures. For us to know how to use our full faculties with money, you have to know two things. They both start with N. The first is your narrative. A narrative is a belief that we make up to make sense of life, sometimes to protect us even. This might have happened to you as a child. You touch something hot, you get burnt. The fact is, the pot was hot. Our narrative, which we make up, could be, the kitchen is a dangerous place, or I don't like to eat hot food, as my children tell me. Now, our narratives are formed often by pain to protect us. And what about our money narratives? It's a different kind of pain. Shame, exclusion, rejection. We form our narratives to protect ourselves from these, or perhaps to seek the opposite, acceptance, love, and admiration. Our narratives are separate from fact, and they often lie below the surface. We live in a time where we share our opinions freely, in abundance, perhaps too much. But we don't really share our narratives because they're hidden from us, and especially our money narratives. So I'm going to be brave and share mine. My narrative is I'm worthless if I can't make money. As a good Asian kid in a developing country, my belief was I had only one job, which was to get good grades, get into a good school, find a high-paying, stable income. You know, we have our big Asian family gatherings. So every time we meet, whether it's family or just friends coming over, I get asked, or all children get asked, how are your studies? How are you doing in school? And if I was the golden child that year, I was celebrated. The uncles and aunties would tell their children, why can't you be more like her? I've also been on the other end of it. So I felt that pain of being lesser, of being excluded, of being somehow less worthy. So being on both sides of the coin imprinted a narrative. And that narrative shapes our decisions. In fact, we're so blind to it, it's just part of us, that we don't even realize that it's part of a decision. So I did have the grades for it, but I went to finance because that was kind of the highest thing to do as established by my narrative. And I stayed in finance. What is your narrative? Keep that in your background as we keep moving. But I'm going to shift your attention to neuroscience. That's how our brains work. Now, it's a complex organism, and I'm no neuroscientist. But the basic thing you need to learn are these. We have a primitive brain and houses our amygdala, which is our survival center. This is our guard dog that keeps us safe from harm. It keeps our body safe as well as our ego safe. And if we see a threat, the guard dog gets activated. We also have another system in our brain called the prefrontal cortex. That's our highest level of coordination, the executive center. The one that you want to be using to make judgments. The one that can synthesize inputs from multiple sources. That's our wise owl. Most of the time, our brains work in concert. There are many other brains I haven't mentioned, but most of the time they work together. But sometimes our amygdala, or our guard dog, comes to the fore. Times like this. You're crossing a street and a car comes at you. Do you want your wise owl thinking, I wonder how fast that car's coming. Should I move left or right? Your guard dog gets you moving. Get out of Dodge. Ask questions later. The thing is, we don't always know when our guard dog kicks in. And our guard dog is also triggered by our brain's tendency to the negative. Our brains are Velcro to the negative and Teflon to the positive. If you lost money, you would feel that pain much deeper than if you won the same amount. So congratulations, you know narrative and neuroscience. How does that work with money? Last year at Christmas, I woke up to this headline. And I found that 3 weeks of partying, present shopping, merrymaking. If any of you invested in the S&P 500, it just went down 15% in 3 weeks. That is ripe for amygdala hijack. But now that you know that we have these elements at work, your wise owl might say, okay, the fact is 15% drop. It occurs as a threat to me. And it's not just a threat to the value of my money, but it could be a threat to my self-worth. I mean, if I can't make money, but I'm losing money, that's even worse. So knowing our narratives and knowing that our brains are firing a certain way can help us pause and make other decisions. So what do you think? Do you use your whole head when it comes to money? If you're sitting there and thinking, no, I would never do that. I would never panic sell. No, I'm good. Or if you feel a little bit defensive, well, you've just connected your body sensation to your amygdala. If you can, however, chuckle a bit, you can see parallels in your life. You're a little bit curious about what else there might be to learn. That's the experience of your wise owl kicking in. I also asked you if you knew anyone who didn't use their head. When I started looking at my narratives and mastering my brain, I could suddenly understand a lot of financial insanity. People who did things in finance against their better sense. And I have lots of compassion for them because I was once in that position. I went to college a year after the Asian financial crisis. I was lucky to have parents who, while it was not a walk in the park, could fund my education. Other people in their generation did not. It's very alive to the financial hardship. 2 years later, I was being flown around the country, whisked off in black cars, wined and dined as part of my recruitment process. So I've seen opportunity. I've worked in the dot-com boom. But opportunity, the risk of financial loss, and then my financial narrative. Which one wins? The irony is this. I made a lot of money telling people what to do with their money. Big corporations, individuals, but for a time, I didn't take that advice. And I work a lot now with women who come to me and say the same thing. I know investing is important, but I can't seem to get started. Financial narratives are a problem when they start to limit us, when we are locked in a certain path. And it can lead to imbalanced behavior, like hoarding cash, or the opposite, taking undue risk, overspending, or any penny pinchers here? You know who you are. And then there's also a group of people who are in denial about money. I've been there too. When I left the banking industry, I said, there's got to be things more important than money. It's undignified to talk about money. We talked about today how the world is heading to the brink of extinction, and yet our actions don't correspond to it. That's another form of conflict between our values and what we know and our actions. And financial narratives could be at the source of that. I want to share a few stories from my time on Wall Street. Walked into the office one day. My bullpen mate was getting chewed out by his boss. 5-minute tirade, profanities, personal attack. I couldn't wait for him to leave and ask my colleague, what happened? Did you guys lose $1 million deal? He said, we went to a pitch. I had a footnote on page, 1 footnote, and I forgot to delete the S. It's a world where money was so core. It was about survival, that we could behave this way with another human being. So I went into an industry where everyone shared my narrative to the extreme. You're nothing if you don't bring in money, quarter after quarter. Kind of like Lord of the Flies, but in suits. And there was also a growth at all costs Shark Tank mentality that at some point I found objectionable enough to leave. If we are worshiping money, and if money is so core to our self-worth, and we're driven to pursue that at all costs, that has created some of the unsustainable growth or the pursuit of it that we see in the world today with some of our unicorns. Now, what if we could rewrite our narratives? What if we could get mastery of our brains around money and rise above that survival instinct? It is possible. I wandered my way into figuring that out, and there are resources these days to help someone who wants to begin that journey of consciousness. And I'm really excited to think about what lies beyond. What's possible if we can resolve for ourselves, first of all? So my self-worth is no longer linked solely to the money I make. I've found a way to combine both the capitalist and the people-centric passions of mine in what I do. And rewriting that narrative was the start of my discovery of how we can take that further. I started to look at how I consumed, what I bought, and what I invest in. Yes, I did invest. I did start investing. It goes beyond the price tag, right? If we're money-driven, or at least when I was money-driven solely, it was about what's the cheapest, what's the highest profit one can make. But now it's about finding partners who share the values that you can trust. And it's about investing in things that are aligned with what I believe in. Investing in businesses that can take the whole picture into consideration and not the single bottom line. So the fact is, if we can let go of our narratives, there's a whole world ahead of you. You have the opportunity to live a full life if you're not narrowly focused on avoiding shame, exclusion, and rejection, and pursuing things that might help you escape from that. And what about the world? So if just 10% or 20% of us had that conscious internal journey, and we rethought how our immediate sphere could change, what about that next layer, our schools, our workplaces, our communities? Is it possible that someone who isn't the highest producer also be a great employee? Can we go beyond a singular ideal of what makes a good person? And what about our governments and our financial systems? I'm inspired when I think about what can be possible if we can rise above the scarcity, above the fight for self-preservation, and really put our money to work with our values. We can create a world, an economy that works for everyone, and one that doesn't tell us we're alone if we're not good enough, but one where we're all connected and we can work towards one end. Thank you.